My screen set up now with that format we need for our day today. How is everyone? If you can unmute yourself, because we're going to be participating. So go ahead and unmute yourself. I'd love to see you all and meet you. I've been with Keller about almost 2 years. I've been in real estate about 14 years, but came to Keller from John L. Scott a couple of years ago. So I am going to get our PowerPoint up here, get us started. Okay. Are we all doing well this morning?
Yes,
Okay.
but I can't see. I don't know if you can see me.
And is that Donald?
Yes.
So I don't see your face. I see that you are off video, but I don't know. All I see is your name. So that would be something to do with your camera, more than likely.
Okay.
But I can hear you, so that's important. So let me share my screen. And then I will get our PowerPoint going. So we're going to talk today about negotiating the deal. How many of you have already written an offer and kind of been through this process a little bit? Anybody?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you guys know how to work the functions at the bottom? Let's talk about that a little bit so I can make sure that you can interact with me. Do you know how to raise your hand on the bottom down there? And let me know that you need me to address you because you have a question. Does everybody know how to do that? That's the first thing I want to make sure is that you guys know how to get a hold of me so that I can help you with whatever you don't hesitate to ask questions. Like I said at the beginning, I really like this to be interactive because I don't like to hear myself talk a whole bunch. So feel free to ask questions. Okay, so you can see the screen. It says Ignite Skills to Spark a Great Career. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So again, like I said, I'm Brenda Pierce, and I'm a solo agent. And I've been with Keller since April of 2019. So the process today, I guess the class is about 2 hours. We'll take a break right about 10 o'clock so that we can get another cup of coffee or use the restroom or whatever we need to do. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask your question. And then if we can all be muted while we're going through the actual slides, that's helpful to keep the noise level in the background down. So today, what you should be able to do after this class is be able to break down and apply the tactics that are the common points of negotiation. I wrote down a few when I was waiting here, and I was gonna, just bring out that negotiation isn't only the price, but there's going to be negotiation that you're going to have to deal with the other agents, such as furnaces and roofs, title and escrow, dates of closing. There's going to be many things that when you represent your buyer, they're going to want, and many things that when you're representing the seller, they're going to want maybe something different. So I can tell you in my career, the best thing that I've got going for me when I'm dealing with clients is my ability to be a middleman that takes the emotion from the buyer or the seller, cools it down before delivering it to the listing agent or the selling agent to let them know what the other party wants. So that is your big task when you're in the middle of a transaction, because attitudes and emotions run really high sometimes. This is a big deal for a lot of people. I think as we do transactions, we become a little numb to how important this really is to a lot of people. So they do it 2 or 3 times in their lifetime. And, you know, we can end up doing it 2 or 3 times a month, or 2 or 3 times a week, or 2 or 3 times a day when, you know, you're doing lots and lots of transactions. So we're going to analyze and recall counter tactics to make the negotiation a win-win. It's one of Keller's morals, or their values, is the win-win or no deal. So we always want to make sure everybody is happy in this. And then we're going to examine the negotiation strategy of the 3 Ps, which is prepare, present, and position. And we'll employ those strategies through practical application. Okay. So let's start this little slideshow. So what we're going to focus on today, along with those other things that I said, is we're going to lead generate. We're going to talk about growing your business in lead generating for buyers and sellers, making your seller listing presentations and getting listings, make your buyer presentations and get listings, and review real estate, preview real estate. And then in running a business, you're going to market your seller's listings, you're going to show buyers houses, and then negotiate contracts. And as we've talked about, that's what this class is about, but it's also the biggest part of your job and can ruin something the quickest is when you're negotiating. So it's really a skill you want to put at the top of your preparing list, is to be sure that you can negotiate without emotion and without taking things personal. I think that's really important, is to know, do not take it personal when they tell you that they don't want to do what your seller or your buyer has requested. And also, guys, try not to give your own personal opinion too much to what your seller or buyer should do. You want to give them options. You are a problem solver, not a problem starter. Lots of times I've noticed in transactions, I get agents who get their personal opinion in there a whole bunch, and it ends up causing friction, because then the buyer or the seller has these ideas that their listing or buyer's agent has given them. So keep that in mind also. Then we're going to talk about transaction management to closing, your vendor management, which your vendors are your inspectors, your lenders, your title and escrow, etc. We'll talk about setting goals in this, compliance and risk management, attending training and, attending training and managing money. I had to get my little taskbar out of the way here. So, negotiations are an integral part of this real estate transactions that you'll be doing. Negotiations can be a pivotal point in the transaction, and it's important to find common ground and to strive for win-win agreements. Negotiations can be a deal maker or a deal breaker. And honestly, it's usually not the item that's being negotiated. It's usually how it's being handled. So just keep that in mind. You will walk away from a transaction that you lose, and you'll think, I can't believe we couldn't negotiate and get over a $500 difference. And that is when the agents got in the way, typically, because we'll talk about it later, but there are many times where I've just stepped up and said, I will pay for the engineering search, or I will, let's just get it done and let's move forward. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyone have any questions so far? I can see you now, Donald, so that's good.
I have a very off-topic question.
Okay.
So the class the other day, we were talking about buyer presentations and everything, and I'm trying to put one together. And I don't care for the ones on command, and they suggested Canva as a source and Scott Leroy Marketing. And on Scott Leroy Marketing, their website, they didn't have any templates. And Canva, I can't find any. They have slideshows, but not printouts. Do you have any recommendations on where to find some?
Okay, so as far as a buyer presentation, you're talking about, you want something with a slideshow and some verbiage and stuff? Is that what you want?
A printout rather than a slideshow. And
okay.
Canva has the slideshow.
So for a buyer presentation, for a printout, everybody's probably got a lot of their own. Honestly, with a buyer's presentation, I don't want to say wing it, but I've internalized mine so that I can just sit down and talk to them about it. I don't use a lot of presentation material with a buyer. There's some things inside of this that we can talk about later, that there is a buyer's information sheet and some other items that were in this packet that came for this that I can share with you guys. And it's able to get what you really want with a buyer is to be able to talk to them about what's important to them, as opposed to with you, when you do a listing agreement or a listing presentation, you're kind of selling yourself and what you can do for them. And with a buyer, it's more of becoming a consultant and asking them what they need from you and then working with that. So who was that was talking to me? I couldn't see who it was.
Morgan.
Morgan. So after this, if you want to reach out to me, we can connect with Goldie and find out if there's something that they specifically are giving you guys. I don't have my mentor book here in front of me, so I apologize, but I can look in there and see if there's other things that they want us to give to new agents as far as what they use for their buyers. The one thing that they really want us to get comfortable with is a buyer's agreement, where you're having them sign that they're going to work with you. And that is the main piece of paper or item that you want to put into your buyer's presentation. But there are several other things. I just don't use them. So like I said, I have some inside of my computer here that I'd be happy to email to you that they put in here. And as we get into the contract, they'll go over them and how to use them and stuff. So we'll get to that. Okay, Morgan?
Okay, thank you. What is your email so I can email you after?
Brenda.pierce@kw.com.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So then we're going to examine those 3 Ps that I told you about, which is the, let me go back to, I have 3 Ps for price, presentation, and promotion, which is when you're listing a house. So inside of negotiation, it is prepare, present, and position. And so we're going to examine how to approach that inside of your negotiation, analyze, and then actually employing those 3 Ps into a transaction, and daily success habits that will help you. Sorry about that. I keep trying to move stuff on my screen. Daily success habits that will get you to that success point. So we'll get to those here in just a few. As far as the 3 Ps, we're going to be able to break down those common points of negotiation, examine the 3 Ps approach to negotiation, analyze the counter tactics, real play, recap, and then the success habits. And we're going to have you break down those common points in a transaction and learn how to apply that. So we'll be doing that today. So, and as we get further into this, that we can either break out into rooms or we can all stay together. I think there's 11 of us, so we can all stay together, or we can break out into separate rooms and do it one-on-one with a partner. So, so this here on the left is the buyer and the buyer's agent, the seller and the seller's agent. This is the relationships that are going to be going on during this transaction. And we need you to consider, how can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of this deal? What I mentioned earlier is having that ability to keep your emotions low and your professionalism high, and be able to communicate to the seller's agent or the buyer's agent, whichever one you are not, what your client's needs are and why, and then how can we align them together with what the other person needs. This is a real strategy. I find that the humbler I am when I'm communicating to the other agent, the more love I get from them, for lack of a better way to put it. if I call them with demands, they instantly put up their resistance. And if I call them in a real, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, but I forgot to ask you, my buyer really needs to be able to get in here by the 23rd. I really apologize. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Is that something that you think your seller would be willing to do? I get so much more participation, and she becomes my advocate. She tries to get that for me. What do they say? You get more flies with honey. And in this business, that is so very true, you guys. So really work on that humility when you're in this transaction, because it's not about you. It's really about your buyer or your seller getting where they want to go. And the best way you're going to be able to do that for them is by being humble and being a servant and really trying to get what your client needs. We need the paycheck, but we're not going to get it by being bullies or brutes or rude and any of that kind of stuff. So, and communication is truly the key. So what are some ways that you've seen in your life that negotiation, any of you have children, you find yourself negotiating with your children all the time, your spouse, your mom and dad? Anybody have any recent negotiations that you can talk to us about that you've experienced?
I have a negotiation with my children every night at bedtime.
Exactly. And how do you win that negotiation?
I won't lie, a lot of times it's strong arming.
Okay. So you have to use a little bit of strong arming with the children.
Yes.
Yes. How old are they?
4 and 11.
Okay. Yeah. So they haven't learned how to push back quite as well as maybe a listing agent has, or they don't have as much invested in staying up. But
I don't know, my 4-year-old's pretty good.
Yeah, well, maybe they can get into real estate. So that's an example of negotiating. And over the years, as they've gotten older, you've had to adjust your negotiations, right? So that's how we look at it with real estate too. I mean, you just have to adjust, and you're going to be adjusting to different people's personalities. You're going to be adjusting. Sometimes I can tell you just the communication gets frustrating because either you can't speak the same language or something. You need somebody to help you do that communication. I've had people use the wrong terms. I had a client tell me over and over again that they had done the crawl space, that they had fixed the crawl space. Well, their terminology for the crawl space, they were talking about the attic. When they told me crawl space, I thought they had done the downstairs underneath the house. So we have to learn to work through those miscommunications and get back onto the side of getting the deal done. So, oh, good. I can move that over like that.
Yeah,
all right. Go ahead.
I have 4 daughters and 2 granddaughters and a wife. So there's constant negotiation going on, and I'm just learning still that, and they're all adult girls aging from 22 to 30, that I really need to even now just learn more on my listening skills, because sometimes I have a tendency to lay the law down and not really listen as well. So I'm working on my listening skills in order to negotiate better, to really see what they're trying to tell me all the time, rather than always trying to talk over them. And I need to listen more. So that's the same thing with my wife and all of my daughters. So yep. I'm learning and getting better, but yes. I'm always reminded that it's important to be a good listener.
You are exactly correct, Donald. That is a huge point to point out, that listening, making sure that you're actually hearing what they want and not just listening then to turn around and explain why you have a better idea, or your way is better, or your client is more important, or it affects your client more. So that's exactly true. Listening and understanding why the client needs what they are saying they need, and then getting to the bottom of it and finding out, because the clients can be just as obstinate, and they may want a closing date because that's what they feel is the only thing that'll work for them. But if you really listen, you might hear some fear around, maybe it's going to be more expensive, or maybe they think that something's going to happen if they don't close that date, and that kind of thing. And like I said at the beginning, they don't know what we know. They haven't been through this as many times as we have, and they don't know that there's different solutions, that it doesn't have to be the exact way that we put it on the contract, that it can be flexible, that it can be arranged, it can be, changed up a little bit. So then let's see. Goal of the negotiation is to get a contract. So what are some skills that you think great negotiators possess? I know a lot of us have seen the movie like The Negotiator and that kind of thing. So what do you think, aside from what we talked about at the beginning, what do you think are some other skills that a negotiator needs to have when negotiating? So as a mom, what skills do you have? Bribery? As a husband, what skills do you use? Do you use gifts? Do you use offering to do something else for them another time?
I think that something that's real important in negotiating and in relationships is just learning the art of compromise.
Yep. Exactly.
And you don't always agree on things, and it's good to learn how to be able to compromise.
Spoken like a true person that lives with a lot of women. Yes, so you definitely want to understand that compromise, and understanding that compromise doesn't mean losing, right? You don't lose anything, because in the long run you actually win. But it's just getting over that, goes into a whole nother realm. But we talk a lot about ego and stuff in some other classes that I'm in. And that's where it comes from, is people get their heart set on something, and then it becomes an obstinate, this is what I want, and I don't want to lose what I had in mind. And I want what I want when I want it. So making sure that you're acting your age when negotiating is very helpful, and being a great listener, being willing to compromise, as long as you're not compromising your buyer or seller's private information, financial information. Like, you can't say, we can't do that because my buyer doesn't have any more money, or that kind of thing. You really have to be careful when you're imploring and trying to get your way, that you're not disclosing things that you're not supposed to disclose as well. So you're always the advocate for your client, but you want to make sure that you're also protecting them and being your fiduciary duty to them that you need to be. So in the negotiation, it's the bargaining process between two or more parties seeking to discover a common ground to reach an agreement to settle a matter or a mutual concern, or to resolve a conflict. So that's that. After you get into the contract, you may come across something where there's a thing that needs to be fixed because the appraisers called it out, and the seller, that's when the seller starts pushing back, and they actually, resist because that's not what they had planned. And then it becomes us with working with the other agent, finding a common ground and a place of resolution for that, because it has to be resolved. If the appraiser called it out, there's just no negotiation with the appraisers. Do not know how to negotiate very well. They are adamant and set on what they want when they call it out on a home. And so then we have to really side up with that other agent and the seller and try to put it together so that we can appease the appraiser. So everything is a negotiation. Some are a lot more important than others. So so it says to get into a small group and have a conversation, but how do you guys feel about that? Do you want to stay together and kind of just everybody turn your mics on and your videos on and everybody can kind of participate? Otherwise, I'm going to throw you into some rooms and you can talk to each other in there. But I think, especially being new and not knowing a lot of people, you may be more comfortable in here talking with me. But we want to talk about how can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal? Let's just start with that question. You guys can each kind of tell me the worst case scenario and the best case scenario in that.
I feel like your confidence would play key in that. If you're not confident in negotiating, that would affect the outcome.
Absolutely. You have to believe in what you're asking for instead of you would sometimes look like you're just trying to get something extra. And there is a huge advantage to being confident when you ask for it. Because for one thing, when you're confident, you also don't get your emotions in there, right? Because you're confident, you're just asking. If you get your emotions in there, it's usually because you have something that you're afraid you're not going to get or something you're going to lose. So anybody else have something to add to that?
I just think kind of showing a willingness to also take something from the other side. I mean, it's not all you asking, and then not giving a little bit.
Exactly, Heather. If you can say, well, what about if we do that? Are you guys willing to do this? Right? Not, okay, if we're going to do that, then you guys have to do this. Right? You want to just, again, use your humility, ask them, you know, well, okay, we can get that done, but then do you think your client would be willing to do this for us? Okay, so that's a great point, Heather. Then what are some ways that you, okay, we already talked about that, negotiate in your everyday life, the kids and the wives and stuff. We talked about that. What are some ways, some skills that great negotiators possess? We talked about that. Then why is asking questions important in negotiating? We kind of hit on that. Donald was kind of talking about that. But besides showing the other person that you're listening, is there some other reasons that asking questions when negotiating is really important?
You may, sorry. You
Go
may
ahead,
pick
Heather.
something that's a trigger for that other person, something that's like more important to them than actual numbers that you can utilize to, you know, it kind of make your way in.
Absolutely. Brings up another point that maybe you hadn't thought about, that we can, if you give me that, we can do that. And then was it Ed or someone that said something?
Yeah. So similarly, just you have more information. Obviously, knowing more about who you're dealing with helps you collaborate and figure out what their position is, what their, you know, and sort of where that common ground can be. So just information, obviously.
Absolutely. Information is the key. You want to know as much about, the more, you know, and in sales training, again, the more the other person talks, the more you learn. So the quieter you are, you let the other person explain what their true reason for needing what they want in this negotiation is, and you'll learn probably a lot more about some other ideas that you can bring to the table and implement to make this a win-win for everybody. So after the investment of moving a lead through the process, you don't want the deal to fall through. So their ability to negotiate will directly influence the rate of contracts that you close. So it's going to happen small or big in every transaction. There is going to be a negotiation, and closing your transactions, your count per year is going to determine on the ability of you to negotiate. Negotiating when you meet a client at a house, negotiating with the selling agent, getting a pre-inspection done before writing the offer so you don't have to include that inspection in the contract. All of those things are negotiation. I just heard from an agent yesterday that there's a lot of people that are doing virtual tours through homes, and he's having to have them wait because he's wanting the actual clients and their agents to get into the home. So that's a negotiation. I said to him, how do you know that they're doing a virtual tour? And he's like, well, they call and tell me. And I was like, oh, so now I know I won't call and tell you that it's a virtual tour. I will just book it as if I'm taking a client. So everything is a negotiation from the beginning, when you meet your buyer, when you meet your seller. Your listing fee is a negotiation. A home warranty for a buyer is a negotiation. So there's going to be optimum opportunities, or multiple opportunities, I guess is the word, for you to learn negotiation skills. And you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. So hopefully you don't lose the contract over it. But if you do, then you just have to put your boots back on and get back out there and work harder the next day. So
I guess I would have to ask that. I went off on a tangent on that virtual tour thing. Why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. Somebody in the times right now that are, with COVID and people's fears of COVID, why would somebody's just as likely to buy off of a virtual tour as an in-person tour right now, I feel.
That's a great question, Heather. And they are, but I will tell you in my experience that somebody who buys sight unseen with just a video, more likely to back out of the transaction when they see the home than someone who actually saw it when they toured. So you're right, with COVID, it is a safer way for people to, but they have so many contingencies in the contract that allow them to walk out after they've seen the home, that you put yourself and your client in a much more risky position by having someone who just virtually toured it than someone who actually seen it. And as he explained it, he had 30 showings that day. So if I have a full schedule, I want it to be people who have actually seen the home. I have some clients who want me to video for them, and I explained it to them up front that a listing agent does not like to know that you haven't seen the home. It makes them worried because there is honestly, probably a 60% chance that they're going to walk from the transaction once they actually physically walk through the house. Owning a home or buying a home is such a touchy-feely, emotional transaction, right? That to buy it over, I know we're in the age of technology, but I don't think ever buying a home without seeing it and walking through it and feeling like it's your home is a good idea. And we're all moving so quick right now that it's become part of our business plan, but it's a scary one for a listing agent. So keep that in mind when you have your listing, because you'll be dealing with that and you'll see that people are doing virtual tours. But when that contract comes in and you know that they've never seen the home, you need to let your seller know that those people actually haven't seen the house. So
that makes sense.
Okay. Anybody else have any input on that before we move on? Okay. So please turn to page 4 in your participant guide. I guess I should have asked you guys all that at the beginning to make sure you all have that. Or if you have it online, you can look at it on your computer and go to page 4. And we're going to talk about, once the offer is made, that there's 3 possible outcomes. The offer can be accepted, rejected, or countered. If the offer is rejected or countered, that is where your negotiation skills are going to come into major play, okay? I just had a contract rejected yesterday because she said she took the other offer, but when I had sent it over on Sunday afternoon, she told me there wasn't any other offers. So we had asked for closing costs because it had been on the market a couple of weeks and they hadn't had any offers and my client needs them. So then I told her, when she said that they took the other offer, I said, well, communication would have been great because my buyer could have actually came up in price and covered part of his closing costs. But so she didn't do her seller any favors by not coming back to us and negotiating with me. And maybe negotiation isn't her strong suit, where it is mine. And my buyer could have added $5,000 to the contract price and then covered $5,000 of his own closing costs. So let's talk about negotiation issues that have a potential of coming up during that process. So are you guys familiar enough with like a contract? So let's say we've all sent over an offer to a listing agent and they come back with a countered price on there, and maybe they countered the closing cost that we needed and they countered the closing date. So can you guys talk to me a little bit about how you might present your buyer's needs for those items? Are we all, we're in class 7. So have you all taken the Ignite up to this point? No, some of you, Heather, you just popped into 7. I got a Heather Hamilton and a Heather Dewey. So I'm going to say Heather D. Have you taken any of the other Ignite classes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have missed a handful, unfortunately, because I have another job right now.
Okay.
But I'm trying to just pop in when I can. So
that's fantastic. So what's your thoughts then on if I've countered you as the listing agent on the purchase price and the closing date? What might you be able to talk to me about, and how would you handle that?
I mean, obviously go back to my client first and see their thoughts.
Okay. And then I was going to say, and then also talking to the agent and finding out if that's like, are you the only one she countered? That's a first question. You want to know, are you the only one that they countered? Or are there other people that are being countered as well? Because then you have to explain that to your client as well. And then what's important about that is it, because if we move the price up and your client needs closing costs, so there's always like a why behind everything. So the closing date, so they countered the closing date. Is that because they bought another home? Is that because they got transferred? What's important about the closing date? Because your client needed it for that date because their apartment, that's the last day they can be at their apartment. So who's more important in their need there? You know, can you work around that? Does your buyer have another option to go somewhere on that closing date for 3 or 4, 5, 10 days, whatever the seller needed? Don't just automatically give in. Find out, because we don't know the skill level on the listing agent. She may or he may have just took it to his seller and the seller said, no, I want the 15th of March. I don't want to do it at the 5th, on the 5th. I need till the 15th. So go ahead.
I have a question and pop in there.
Yes.
Something you said. You just said that the seller might counter multiple offers. Can they do that at once?
Absolutely. Yep.
And then if they get a counter and 3 of the offers come back with what they wanted, then what?
So typically, especially at this point, it's done verbally. If they happen to write it out on the contract, when one gets emailed back, that's why when you write a contract, there's not only a date stamp, but there's also a time stamp. So you need to make sure that if you're in that situation that you're using that time stamp, because as soon as one comes in that's been, so when they send it out as a counter, there's no contractual obligation. So the buyer accepts it. You have your buyer sign those things. You initial it and you stamp it with a date or a time and send it back. If that agent has already sent you a rescission on that counter, then that counter is no longer viable. They've decided, so somebody else got back to them quicker.
So that at that point it is kind of a first come first serve, right?
Correct.
So if the seller sends out a couple of counters and then they have to take the first one that comes back that does meet their request.
Could they wait for all 3 to come back though? And then
no, because what happens when you counter on a document, so if she calls you or he calls you and says, my seller wants you to raise that by 5,000 and a closing date of this. You say, okay, let me get to my buyer. You call your buyer. Then you call her back and she says, sorry, somebody already called me back and they were willing to go up 10,000. Well, then there's nothing you can do about that. If they're sent out with a form and you get it in your hand, your seller signs it and you scan it and email it back, once it's received by the other side, it is deemed accepted. Okay, because she offered, you accepted. So once she gets one back, then she has to rescind the others that she sent out, and she has to do that via email.
Okay.
So
I'd
she can't do it verbally.
So I'd imagine those 3, let's say we'll go back to your example. She sent out 3 counter offers. I'd imagine they'd make all those 3 the same. Or what
it would depend, because all the offers might not be the same. One might be an FHA, one might need closing costs, one might have an inspection.
Yeah.
So I might, if I had that situation, I would be calling people. I'd say, your offer has an inspection in it. My seller does not want an inspection. Can you do anything about that? Then I'd call the other agent and say, you guys have closing costs in that offer. My seller's not willing to pay any closing costs. You guys want to raise the price and cover your own closing costs. Get back to me. So now if I've done that all in paperwork, then when I get one emailed back to me, then I have to rescind. But if I've done it verbally, then there's no liability. There's no obligation. So you call me back and say, okay, my buyer's willing to do that. And I'd have to say, sorry, someone else already signed and agreed to doing the counter that we sent them. So verbal is the safest way, because then there's no documentation that's been signed.
So then that second document that or the second person that signs and sends it back to them, the agent would just have to get back and like, sorry, I already received one.
Correct. Yep. And I would, and again, this is negotiation and compromise and communication. I'm going to tell you, I've sent counters out to 3 people, and whoever gets back to me first is going to get the home. So
thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. That's the stressful point. Like, you'll probably be at dinner with family when that kind of thing comes down, and you have to step out and you have to try to do it on your phone. So sometimes, it gets to where you're doing the best you can, and it just doesn't end up working out. But hopefully, those are worst case scenarios. But yes.
Would you say usually with the way things are right now, where they say we're reviewing offers at Tuesday at noon or whatever, would you say this kind of response is going to happen within a few hours after that?
Yes, typically.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're going to watch really close for
correct. Yep.
that timing.
That's a good point, Susan. You definitely, if you know a review point, and that's part of the communication you want to have with the listing agent, is what time are you reviewing on the 26th? My buyer is anxious, and we would really like to know what time you're sitting down with your seller so we can be prepared for any counter you might have. Okay, so you would not believe how many agents right now are just writing an offer and sending it over. And I understand that a lot of us are writing a lot of offers for buyers, and we're kind of getting burned out on that. So you're just sending the offer over. But I don't know how many of you do like mental things, but if your heart's not in it and you haven't put every effort into that offer, don't be surprised when it's not accepted, because we can tell, right? I'm on the phone constantly. What do you need? What's the other offers? What can you tell me? Because you can ask them to tell you what the other offers are. They don't have to tell you. They have to get permission from their seller to tell you. But honestly, the best skilled agents are the ones that are going, oh, we have 400. Do I hear 410? Do I hear somebody have 425, right? I've got an offer for 430. Can you beat that? That's going to get your seller the best price that's out there, right? Not by being tight-lipped, because then as a buyer's agent, I'm writing an offer on a $400,000 house. I'm not going to advise my buyer to write it at 430. I don't know that there's an offer for 425 out there. So being communicative as the listing agent is highly advantageous for your seller as well. Okay, so anybody else have any other questions about that? Asking questions is very important in class and in negotiation.
Sorry, I feel like this issue is just like the hottest thing everyone's talking about right now.
It is.
How often do you do escalation clauses for your buyers?
I negotiate. So I call the listing agent. Are you taking escalation clauses? Some agents don't like them. Some agents are afraid of them. Some agents don't know, especially if it's a small office. They may not have been trained on them and don't know how to use them, because they put yourself as a listing agent in a very precarious position to be sued, because if you don't figure out exactly who gave you the best offer, your seller could end up looking back on the offers later and figure out that somebody else's offer was better for them, especially if you included one that had an inspection and the inspection went awry and they ended up having to go back on the market because the inspection didn't work out. And there was another offer that may have been a little low, but it didn't have an inspection in it. So escalation clause, as a listing agent, I cross them off and counter back with what they offered as their high in the escalation clause. So I tell my buyer that you are putting out here your whole hand. You are showing your hand. So don't be surprised if the listing agent doesn't counter back with a counter of your full price. Then that takes the heat off of that person as the listing agent to whether or not they figured out the escalation clause correctly, to figure it out, you know, if the closing costs are all figured out correctly and all that kind of stuff. And you're willing to pay that. So let's just put our best foot forward. Ed, do you have a question?
I was going to tell a quick story. So we just got our first deal, our first mutual acceptance last night.
Congratulations.
And, you know, we're just literally thinking we're just getting used to this whole thing. But basically, there were 31 offers, and we actually definitely needed an escalation clause. And ours was, in fact, slightly lower than the highest, but we escalate our cap on our escalation was, you know, slightly lower, but we did have the inspection waiver as well as the appraisal waiver that helped us get that one. And we were super excited. It felt like we won the lottery last night. But yeah, so that's my quick 2 cents on escalation clauses in this market. And depending on the deal, this is a very competitive property.
Yep.
We definitely.
It is. And then there's more than one way to get the deal accepted. And like he said, they weren't the highest, but they had the other outcomes, the other things in there that the seller wanted more importantly than what the highest offer was. So, back to the escalation clause, communicate with the listing agent and find out if they want that in the offer. Sometimes they leave it up to the other agents to be the escalator. They leave it up to us as a buyer's agent to lay out all that information in front of their sellers. So they take the escalation clauses and walk through all that with their seller and bump it up that way. So again, if you have a buyer that's interested in a house, text or call that agent with your most humble, kind self and tell them that you have this awesome buyer that you really want to get into this house, and what can I do to make that happen on this house? They love your seller's house and they'll tell you what they can. So, and if you cannot get them to communicate, let your buyer know that. I just tell my buyer, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to get them to tell me how I can help you. I show them the text messages. They may not have permission from their seller. You know, don't blame them. Well, they don't communicate, they don't respond. I would say they may not have permission from their seller to give me this information ahead of time. So we're going to just have to put our best foot forward. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to page 5 in your guide. So the common points of, sorry?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are people including love letters these days in their offer?
So I do.
Okay.
When I know there's multiple offers. And, you know, if somebody's buying a house and it's going to be totally remodeled and they just like the area and they're going to put a renter in it, they're probably not the love letter kind of person. But I'm working with a client that's been here in the United States 11 years. He's a new citizen. Can't believe he's buying a home in the United States for the first time. I had him write a love letter about being a single dad and what it means to him to, chokes me up, what it means to him to own a home here. So I submit that with his offer, because if the listing agent gets on your side, how great is that, right? So it's another point too. Reputation in real estate as a realtor and with people in your peers in your market, keep your reputation clean. That's a huge negotiation skill right off the bat. Don't Don't think I don't call somebody and say, hey, Tom, how is it at General Scott? God, I haven't seen you since I left there 2 years ago. How's things with the, you know, the broker, yada, yada. And they're like, hey, Brenda, good to hear from you. How's it at KW, right? Oh, yeah, that's a negotiation skill. Okay. So if you know them, and being at Keller Williams, having 300 agents or more in our office, it's a huge tool in your belt when you call that agent that you see is from KW Puget Sound or KW Mountains to Sound, saying, hey, this is Amanda with the Puget Sound office. How are you? You know, I haven't met you yet, but I have a client who really loves your client's house, right? Let him know you're from Puget Sound or Mountains to Sound or wherever. Okay. Good point. Yeah. Being closely knit with your realtors makes a huge difference, because especially if you have a good reputation for closing and they know that you'll get the deal done, or you work at Keller Williams Puget Sound, they know you're trained really well and that you have good support staff. You're not just going to be winging it through this transaction. Okay. Big negotiation skill right there. Okay. So page 5, we're going to talk about the common points that fall into one of 2 categories, either pricing or terms. We've been kind of talking about a lot of other stuff, some pricing, but terms are an important one. And then, of course, those other side things that we talked about. While sales price is the primary factor in negotiation, it's not the bottom line. In a situation where a seller receives multiple offers at the same price, it is the terms of those offers, in addition to the buyer's financial position, that will determine which one wins. So when they talk about the financial position, do you guys know your loans? Have you taken the class for knowing different buying loan terms, such as conventional, FHA, down payment assistance, VA? You guys all have that kind of under your belt and know I guess there's a hierarchy. You definitely know there's a hierarchy to that, correct? Where conventional is going to be the most favored, cash is king, and then conventional is the most favored. FHA and VA are, you know, looked at as more difficult and more likely to have issues. And it's because of the appraisers. It's not the buyer as much as it is the appraisal. And then the down payment assistance, which is an amazing, Washington has one of the best down payment assistance in the country, but it's still showing that the buyer doesn't have any cash. So it's a weak position to be in when you're in a multiple offer position. So that's kind of the hierarchy. I talk about the hierarchy. So here's some terms of the financial or time-based or both. When the buyer and seller can't agree on a sales price, the following 5 offer terms might come into play: closing cost, closing date, conveyances. So that's certain things like the washer and dryer, the chandelier, the screen door. You know, maybe somebody has a really nice screen door and they've put on there that it goes with the seller. Earnest money and option fee, and repairs. So earnest money is an interesting one because it doesn't affect the purchase, because the seller doesn't get the earnest money unless the buyer walks. But what it does show is the ability to afford to buy a home. So if I'm trying to buy a house and I'm buying a $350,000 home, but I only have $1,000 earnest money, that's a signal to the listing agent that it's a little softer offer. So being able to have your client put up a 1% earnest money, even if they get some of it back because they're doing a down payment assistance or they're getting closing costs from the seller, having that money to put that earnest money up front is a big statement. But more than likely, it's not gonna affect the offer unless your client, my people always ask me, do I get my earnest money back? What if I don't like the house or it doesn't inspect well? I tell them that unless they pack their bags and fly to Switzerland, most likely they would get their earnest money back in a situation where something went wrong in the contract that they didn't want the house. So earnest money is a big question you'll get from buyers a lot. They don't understand how the earnest money works. But it is a negotiation. You can make it a $5,000 non-refundable. As soon as we do the inspection, we'll put a $5,000 non-refundable earnest money, because we've already been told by the lender that my people are approved. They just, as long as it appraises, they are approved. So that's having a really well underwritten client. You could make your earnest money non-refundable. And I would say in the days of 30 offers on the same home, we're gonna see that more and more frequently.
I thought that the earnest money was only refundable if it was due, if the deal falls through due to something out of the buyer's control. Like if they just change their minds for whatever reason, even if it's kind of like a big life reason happens, but otherwise everything was fine. I didn't know there was even room to ask for it back. Isn't that just gone?
No, so there's several contingencies. There's actually like 40 contingencies.
I mean, I know there's like financing and inspection and appraisal,
Correct.
all those things. What I'm saying is, yes, if those come out and it's like, oh, the appraisal doesn't meet, or oh, there's stuff in the inspection they don't want to do. Those are like the result of something. What I'm asking is, if all that is fine, but then the buyer for some reason just decides they can't buy a house right now or they don't want to get it, like they just change their mind flat out.
Correct. That's like short of packing their bags and leaving. They're just not going to follow through. They don't get to just not follow through. Right. But as a good real estate agent, there is usually something still left all the way through the contract that, you know, there's a homeowners association review, there's a seller's disclosure review, there's a neighborhood review, there's just on and on and on things. That's why the more of those things you can take out when you're writing an offer for a seller, the better off you are. So, because the seller's agent knows that there are a lot of ways that a buyer can get out. So, yeah, you're right, Susan. It's not necessarily beyond the buyer's control, because a lot of those contingencies are in the buyer's control, but the buyer is the one who's going to end up making it where he doesn't get his earnest money back. He's the one that makes that happen by doing something really stupid, like not showing up at signing. I had someone not show up the day of signing. She was willing to walk away from her $3,000 earnest money because she had decided she could not afford to own a home. She did not want to do it. There's nothing you can do. A seller gets the $3,000, which is pittance when they've just had their house off the market for 40 days, right? But that's why an earnest money is a important factor. It says a lot about how dedicated somebody is to buying the house. Because if she had put up a $10,000 earnest money, she probably would have figured out a way to own that home. But since it was $3,000, it was better to walk away from it now than feel the struggle of owning a home for her later on. So that's the one and only time I had that happen in 13 years, 14 years. That was shocking. Any more questions about any of that stuff that we've talked about? It's 10 o'clock. Everybody want to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and go to the restroom? The sooner we're all back, the sooner we can get going and the sooner we'll be off of here. So go get some more coffee, something to eat, go to the restroom, and then I'll see you here back in like 10:05 or 10:06 or something. Okay? Okay, is everybody getting back here? Let's see. Okay, so we are going to look at page 6 in your guide. And instead of breaking into the rooms, we're going to do the same thing. Everybody good with just doing it, all of us here together? You like that better? Breaking out into rooms that you don't know anybody? Okay. So you'll need to read through the list of negotiating tips. And then after reading those tips, we're going to have you look back on page 5 and select a common point of negotiation, either price or one of the listed terms. And you're going to write down your choice on the space provided on page 5. Then you're going to use what you've learned so far to brainstorm a list of how they might respond to that negotiation point. We want 3 types of responses. So your position, I'm going to go back to those 3 terms again. That's the 3 P's. You have prepare, present, and position. So while looking at your idea for your negotiation, what they're asking you to do then is to use one of the 3 types of responses. Is it based on your preparation, your position? What's the third one? I keep forgetting about that third one. Preparation, position, and does anybody else have it written down? Oh, presentation. So they want you to share your selected common point of negotiation and possible responses that you've drafted. So go ahead and take a look at page 5 and 6 and write down what you're going to negotiate with me on. And then I'm just going to kind of go down the list really quickly, and we're going to talk about it a little bit because I think we're about a third of the way through. So we'll get going a little faster here, but I've enjoyed getting to know you guys and talking. So we'll go from there. So Amanda, did you pick a thing that you'd like to negotiate?
I'll try closing costs.
Okay. So why do you need closing costs?
Because my buyer doesn't have enough money to cover it.
Okay. Make it easier for them to buy. Okay. Are you willing to move the purchase price up to cover those?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good because my seller's worried about it appraising at the price we have it anyway. So that's perfect.
Okay.
We'll accept your offer that way.
Okay.
Okay, Heather, what do you got to negotiate? Heather Hamilton, sorry.
That's okay. Which Heather? I was going with closing dates.
Okay, and why does your buyer need a different closing date?
Her lease is going to be up on February 1st.
Okay, she doesn't have anywhere else she can go. She doesn't want to move twice.
No, she doesn't have any place. She's on her own in the area. So
okay. Yeah, my seller is willing to let her move in on that date as well. So that works out perfect. Ed and Junko, what do you guys got for negotiation? I'm just going down my list here. Ed?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yep. So let's go for conveyances. You know, my buyer really likes the furniture you have set up in both the office and home office and workout kind of space. He's ready to sort of pay market value for those if you're willing to leave those as conveyances.
My seller would love that since they're moving out of state and they don't want to have to worry about selling that. So you've got it. Send me over a Form 34 with the list of furniture that you want and how much you're willing to pay us. We can take it out in escrow. Okay. Right. Morgan, what do you got?
Well, I was going to do closing costs and then I was going to do closing dates. So now I was trying to think of something for repairs.
It's okay. You could do the same. You might have a different reason.
Well, they took both my reasons.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think of something for repairs. Well, okay. Sorry.
Just do your closing costs again. Why does your buyer need closing costs?
Closing costs because they can't afford it. They can't afford it. Yeah.
They need that in order to make it work for them. Mm-hmm. So are they willing to raise the purchase price to cover it?
Not more than what it's at.
Okay. Now, is that based on what they qualify for, or is that just their position?
Yeah, what they're at is their max.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll go ahead and let that happen. So, okay, very good. Yeah, that's important to know whether that's just where they're comfortable or is that where they're qualified for. So the lender qualification is an absolute. The other is a personal position for them. So, okay.
Hey, I have a quick question about that scenario. Yeah. As far as, should we let the other agent know that they're already at their max? I mean, is that?
So we don't, mine's going to say, and so that's just learning the professional terminology, but you want to say the lender has them qualified at 350. So that's where we need to be. Now, whether that's because that's what they've told the lender, I always act like I'm not involved. And then a lot of times, we don't know our buyers' personal positions, whether they have 401ks that they could get more money. I suggest those things to my buyers, but I don't get involved with a lender in figuring all that out. But so when I'm communicating to the listing agent, I honestly don't know. I just know that they've been qualified at 350. So
that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And Heather Dewey, what is your scenario for your negotiation?
So repairs, these windows look like the seal's broken and they're all fogged up. Is there any money we can take off for repairs for the windows?
So have you had an inspection and did the inspector communicate issues with those?
We did. The seals are broken on all the windows.
Okay, great. And they're doing a FHA loan, so they'll probably need those repaired anyway. So yes, my seller would do that.
Okay, great.
Okay. Donald? You're on mute. Donald, do you have a negotiation you'd like to make on this home for your buyer?
I guess I'll go with repairs.
Okay.
And the roof looks bad. and it looks like it needs a new roof.
Okay,
So,
same as with, go ahead. I was going to say, so as same as with Heather, something like that. Heather Dewey brought up the windows. When you have when you have a major item such as a roof, a furnace, paint, those kind of things, those are going to be negotiable items through the inspection. Now, when you write the offer initially, you may deduct based on the fact that you saw the roof is bad, but you will need to take into consideration whether or not your client would even be able to buy it with the roof as it is. So it may not be a negotiable item. It may be something that your buyer, when you're looking with a buyer that has a loan, you have to be aware of things such as roof and paint and furnace, because those are major components that the appraiser is going to call out, and the seller may or may not be in a position to fix it. If they're not in a position to fix it, then your buyer won't qualify. So those negotiable items like that, they become part of the transaction in the inspection part and the appraisal part. So that's why I think with negotiation in the beginning, when you're doing the contract, it's more price and terms. It becomes the conveyances of furniture, or something in the yard, or you want their patio furniture. I had somebody who wanted the person's hot tub, and they didn't get the hot tub, but they left them the wiring, which actually the wiring is fixed to the house, so that should have been left anyway, but the guy had wanted to take it. So the major components aren't really negotiable, because the person that's going to determine whether or not that's done is going to be your appraiser and your lending position. So that's a good point that you guys have brought up. So you got to be aware of what's negotiable for your buyer and what's not going to be negotiable based on their loan. Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So if you see the roof is shoddy, we just pulled up to a house the other day for my buyer that I told you about that's new in the country, and he has an FHA loan. And I just got out of the car and looked at him and said, this house isn't going to qualify. I know she says it's FHA financeable, but there's no way this roof has 5 years left on it, and we're not going to be able to buy this. So let's just go to the next house. So
is that the minimum, like a roof has to have at least 5 years, or is there a different number for an FHA loan?
It's typically 5 years. I think VA, when I recall, it may be 10 years. So talk to your lender and get what they're seeing through their appraisals with their appraiser right now. So, but 5 years is a good point to have in your mind. If that roof looks like it's got 5 years left on it, which means it's still got some of those sparkly crustacean things on it, if it's flush and flat, it's done. So, okay, so you guys get the idea of the different negotiation things there. So we'll move on. We're going to go to page 8 in your book. Prepare. So learn, know your goal, know your client, think ahead, set clear expectations, be informed, obey the laws, and know the documents inside and out. The preparation steps agents can take to build confidence to help ensure a smooth negotiation process is to know your goal. Have a clear goal of reaching a win-win agreement in which both the buyer and the seller are satisfied with the outcome of the negotiation. Win-win is a huge thing to remember. Don't just think about trying to win and the other person losing, trying to get things, because the contracts will never come together in that circumstance. It's always got to be a win-win. Both people have to feel like they're winning. Then know your client. Make sure you fully understand your client's goals. Learn the areas in which they are willing to negotiation and where they will stand firm. And then why are they standing firm there? Is that drop dead date for them because they're going to be kicked out of their apartment? Or is that because they want time to go in and paint and do all that fixing up? So those things they have to know in their mind whether or not you think you're going to be able to get that negotiated for them. Anticipate what the other party wants out of the negotiation. Write down how you think they may counter the offer and how you plan to handle it. That takes some experience, I'll be honest with you. So talk to your mentor or talk to the, person that you bounce things off of. But if you see that I'll tell you, title and escrow used to be negotiable. Listing agent got the title office, the selling agent, the buyer's agent got the escrow office because that's where their client was going and that's where they were going to set up escrow. But it became such a cumbersome with sending things back and forth from title office to escrow office that now the listing agent's just making the call on the title and escrow. If for some reason you've already got escrow money in somewhere because your buyer made an offer on another house and we're having to wait 10 days to get that check to clear and come back, the next offer may be negotiable at doing the escrow and title there. So go ahead and ask for it, right? Tell them you've already got escrow money over there and you can't get the money back for 10 days. And then see if they'll change their title and escrow. That's usually not a deal breaker. But those, again, those are things that are going to take some experience to know what is and what isn't. Set clear expectations prior to meeting with the other party. Set clear and realistic expectations with your client. Then under promise and over deliver. Stress the importance of moving quickly to create a sense of urgency. Part of setting clear expectations with your client is being clear that win-lose agreements are likely to be rejected by the other side. So set yourself up for success and make it a win-win. I still get people that ask me today, you think we can write it for 20,000 under? And it's like, the house just came on the market today. There's just no way you're going to get that, but they just don't understand. They're old school. Be informed before making an offer or a counter offer. It's good to practice to speak with 2 other agents. Ask open-ended questions and use active listening to find out as much as you can about the other party and their agent. This helps you know with whom you are negotiating, on what points you will negotiate, and where you and your client have leverage. So again, communication, ask questions, ask things that are important in any transaction as far as taking possession, the financing, your inspection. I call people and I say, we don't have time to do a pre-inspection before submitting this. If we submit an inspection in this agreement, do your other offers have inspections in them? Is it going to kick us out altogether? And an agent will tell you, yes, if you have an inspection agreement in there, we're not going to look at your offer. Okay, because we have 5 that have pre-inspections done or something.
How often are sellers just doing their own pre-inspection? I'm just not seeing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say not huge, but there are several. I mean, you come across it, you know, if you're looking at 30 homes, you'll see it a couple times where a listing agent has recommended, especially if there was some question about what might come on. Because go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, today I'm actually meeting with clients and they've been in their house 36 years. So I was kind of thinking I should suggest that, you know, to, if it'd been a house they've been in a few years, maybe not as much, but since they've been in, they haven't done a ton of updates. I was actually going to ask my mentor, would it be smart for me to advise them to do a pre-inspection and then have that document available in the docs?
So when you have a pre-inspection, do you know the downside of that?
I mean, we may come across things that are pretty major.
Correct. So you have to make them aware of that because they're going to have to disclose that.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
So there's an upside because then they can get it fixed and they won't be surprised. In this market, you're more than likely going to get offers that don't have inspections, or people are going to do pre-inspections. So if they do a pre-inspection, it's either a fail or pass or fail kind of inspection. So if they do a pre-inspection, they'll say, okay, we know it needs, it's got water in the crawl space. It's going to need a new vapor barrier down there. Okay, we'll take it anyway, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, they have to.
A pre-inspection is not nearly as detailed as a regular inspection, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't have the option to ask the seller to fix things.
Oh, right.
Now you can offer less because you know the furnace is junk, but guaranteed the listing agent already knows that anyway.
Okay. How fast can you get pre-inspections done? I mean, if the house lists on Thursday and they're reviewing offers on Monday, like, can you actually?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have an inspector that can do it, let me know. I have one. He's pretty, there's so many inspectors out there. Not all of them are, eating steak right now. Some of them are still eating hamburger. So, nice. And with a pre-inspection, it's not as vital that you have somebody that has a big, gorgeous report and all that stuff that like Sterling Inspection does for us. So there's some small guys that can get out there and do it really quickly for you.
Okay. And when buyers, sorry, just because this is new to me, when buyers are doing this to get their offer ready, they obviously pay for that inspection, that pre-inspection themselves. How much do they run typically?
Some charge the same price they do as a regular, even though it's going to take them half the time, which is around 400. My guy does it for 300. So you just have to call around and find out. Some do not do a pre-inspection. They won't put that on their inspectors. They want them to do a full thing so that they don't have any liability, even though we can't hold an inspector liable anyways. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So then obey the laws. Every state and locality have their own set of laws that regulate zoning, mortgage, qualifications, and other real estate matters. Stay current on your local regulations, and then know the documents inside and out, which of course Keller Williams wants us to do that. And they change frequently, so taking classes frequently to update on new ones and going to the business meetings so you can learn when those forms change is really important. Okay, so asking the right questions is important in the negotiation process. Asking questions allows you to establish and uncover objectives and goals of your clients or the buyers and the listing agent. Through asking questions, you gain more information. As you gain information, you will strengthen your ability to negotiate and increase your chances of having a win-win negotiation. So on that note, it's always really interesting to ask a listing agent why they took your offer. So in your scenario that you guys just won that offer, sorry, I'm trying to open up some more names here. Sorry, I'm still learning Zoom. Ed, why did they take your offer again? I forget what you said.
Well, I think probably maybe three reasons. So one was, of course, I mean, as a default, of course, inspection contingency was waived. I mean, to your point about, they had a pre-inspection, we dug through that. But number two, our we had to waive the appraisal. In other words, we basically had to, supply the, essentially if it appraises low, a gap, money, the additional payment that we would provide. And then three, our lender actually gave him a call, gave the listing agent a call and just kind of reassured them that, we're strong and we were strong and able to close. So I think a combination of those three things was it.
Yep, that's a great point. Having a great relationship with your lender and letting them know that you're sending an offer over and having them call the listing agent is a great thing to do. Makes a huge impression on the listing agent that you really have your stuff together. Okay. All right, so at a basic level, there are two main types of questions used in a negotiation: open-ended and closed-ended questions. And do you guys all know open-ended versus closed-ended? Open-ended is how are you today? Closed-ended is are you sick or feeling well, right? So open-ended questions have an unlimited response. What additional information should I know? What's important about closing in 30 days? Close-ended is, do you have to sell your home by a specific date? Do you have any other offers? And what's the bottom line price you'll consider? Which we already know what that is. That's the listing price, correct? So we don't really need to ask that question. When might it be beneficial to use an open-ended question over a closed-ended question? So when do you think you should be giving them that open-ended question and let them just fill you in?
When you're trying to uncover motivation and details around preferences and things that are kind of fuzzy, and obviously when you have the time to to get into all those kind of more open areas, as opposed to we've got 2 minutes to figure this out.
Right.
Give me type of thing.
Yep, exactly. And when the more information, the better for you, right? As opposed to just a yes or no. So yeah, exactly. You want it when you've got time to let that listing agent just fill you in on what's going to make her client the happiest, then that's the time for the open-ended. So there are simple scripts that can be used to help you get ahead and get the information you need to have a successful win-win negotiation. So I believe you have a script in your booklet there in front of you. It doesn't tell me where. Do you guys see scripts in your book? So it's
On page 9, there's a little paragraph.
Okay, there you go. What would happen if, and so asking this question helps you anticipate the next steps of the negotiation. And why is this important to you? So those are great questions for your buyer as well, right? Or your seller. Those are really great questions for everyone involved in the transaction. Asking the listing agent, what would happen if we, did the pre-inspection and my client found something? Is your seller willing to, help us out at that point? Or to the, buyer, what happens if you don't do an inspection and you find out it needs a new furnace? Are you putting a home warranty on this? Home warranty will solve those kind of issues. So if you put a home warranty on it, then if the furnace is bad, you are covered with your home warranty for the first year. So there's several ways to go around all of that. So page 9, again, it says, again, they want you to work in partners, but we'll just talk here. Circle or underline the keys in the area in which you need more information or certainty before you could confidently negotiate on your client's behalf. So on page 9, there's instructions, and you'll need to just kind of look at that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, do you guys see that on page 9? Apparently it's going to ask, like, what is it about this house that makes it your favorite? What's the possibility of you paying for the repair and we stay at your asking price of $155? And what if the seller counters with a full offer to fix the roof or counters with no repair at all? So let's kind of talk about that. Anybody have any instant ideas or feelings on any of those questions there that you want to share with the group? Okay, so let's go with that first question. What is it about the house that makes it your favorite? So if your buyer says it's in the right school district, and we haven't seen any others in that area, that's pretty important, right? But if they say it has a fenced yard, well, then if we find another home with a fenced yard, it's going to be okay, right? So the reason behind that one being their favorite is going to be really important to you to kind of digest and know how, if it's in the right school district for their kids, then we've got to talk about you raising your offer price a little bit, because at list price, you're probably not going to get it. Now, if it's the fenced yard, then am I going to stress as much on them about raising their price if I think it's uncomfortable for them to do that? They're not going to find the passion to raise the price if it's for the fenced yard like they would because it's in the right school district. You see that? So, you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. Got to know when to press your client, because if you pressure them on every home they write an offer on, especially if you're having to write 4 or 5 or 6 in this market right now, if you make every one of them the most important to that buyer, they're going to be very heartbroken, because every one of them is going to feel like it was the dying end home for them. But if it was because it was in the right school district, we're going to really go do battle. And that's just what I tell my clients. We're really going to have to battle for this because you've made it clear to me that you want this house in this neighborhood. And they only come out, I've only seen 3 in the last year, right? Okay, and then what is the possibility of you paying for the repair and we stay at your asking price of $155? So that's what you'd be asking the listing agent. And if she says, oh, we already know we've got to repair that, then you're like, good, okay. Sorry, I'm talking more than I have in a long time. If she says, no, 155 was figured because we knew we had to do that repair, then you have to relay that back to your buyer. They're not budging on the 155. They already took that into consideration. This home actually comps at 165 if it had a new roof or whatever. So you being informed and knowing the reason why they priced it there is important, and being able to back that up. You don't want to go back to your buyer and say, they've got it at 155, but I saw one down the street that was 155 and it had a new roof. So we should just go lower anyway. I mean, those are the kind of trouble you don't want to start, right? And then what if the seller counters with a full offer to fix the roof or counters with no repair at all? So, I mean, different circumstances there completely. So if you offered lower because the roof was bad, again, we need to know whether you could get it financed, because it doesn't matter if you got, I had a client say, well, let's just offer 100,000 less because it needs all this work. And I said, your lender won't finance you without those things fixed. So we cannot do that. And if there's no repairs at all, if that seller's not willing to repair those major components, your buyer is, unless they're paying cash or conventional. So conventional will allow for things like paint to be bad. They're a little more lenient on the roof, because a conventional offer, the buyer has better credit and probably more down payment. So they're not as worried about their investment as they are with someone who's going with minimal down and no closing costs or whatever. So take those factors into consideration when making these negotiations. Don't volunteer your buyer to buy something that they can't buy is huge. And even though it says FHA on the listing and you have an FHA buyer, you need to know the rules of the FHA according to your lender, so that you can make your own judgment. I've noticed that some people aren't putting FHA as a lending option, even though it might qualify, because they don't want to be held responsible by their seller for saying FHA financeable, taking an FHA offer, and then it not passing the FHA appraisal. So just be aware of the FHA gets a little more convoluted, FHA and VA. Okay, so then we're going to go to page 10, and we're going to review the tips for presenting an offer with a co-op agent. So you call the other agent, you pay attention to nonverbal clues. Keep quiet once you present an offer. Listen carefully to what is important to the other party. Stay calm and relaxed. Focus on the customer's needs and give your offer the best chance. So this is when you've sent the offer over via email and it's been received, and she or he calls you and says, I kind of wanted to go over this with you a little bit. I see you guys are offering 10,000 over asking because you need 10,000 in closing costs. Is that true? You did a pre-inspect, so we're all good there. Is there anything else you need to tell me about your buyer? And you can go into details. And then if they say something like, well, I told you we have 5 offers and yet this offer is at list price, you have to say, that's the best my buyer could do today, right? You can't say, I know I tried to tell my buyer to come off, but they wouldn't, or prices are too high. I have a lender that gets really upset with the escalation clauses. She's like, prices are getting too high. They need to stop doing this. And I'm like, the cat's out of the bag. It's already happening. It's what's going on in the market. This is what we've got to deal with, right? So stay calm and relaxed. Focus on the customer needs. You're an advocate for your buyer. So, or if you're on the listing side, you're an advocate for your seller. Fighting with the real estate agent is not going to do your client any good. No good. The bigger, meaner person does not win in real estate usually. Squeaky wheel does some good, but you have to do it with some humility and some pleading and some, I've pleaded with people, please, my client's written 5 offers and we can't get it done. And yeah. So okay. So we need to turn to page 11. And we're going to talk about how to position your negotiations and provide insight into the group. Okay, so I got to give you some examples here of my negotiating. I told you about my buyer that's from out of the country. And then I've had, in a multiple offer situation, again, I knew the other agent from my John L. Scott office, and I spoke to him directly, and I told him that my client had money in the bank where she could do a low appraisal addendum, and to make sure he let me know if he got other low appraisal addendums, and we would try to beat anything else that came in. We would do the best that she could, but that she absolutely was in love with this home and we really wanted it. And I used his name. I'm like, John, we really want this house. So in the middle of his negotiation with his seller, he would call me and he would say, okay, Brenda, this is what we're looking at. This is what we have here. And my seller would like her to do a 30,000 22 AD, additional down. I said, done. Let me call her and confirm, but she's already told me what her max was. I think we can get that done. He said, if you can get that done, the house is yours. So I called my client, told her what he wanted, called him back, she said, okay. So that's the kind of ability that you need to be ready on the, just beg the listing agent at the beginning. Just let me know what you guys need and I will do my best to get a hold of my client and bring it up to par if there's things that are beating us because they really want this house. Okay. Page 12. You're going to follow the instructions listed at the top of the page to complete the activity. We're going to talk about a win-win agreement on here. So read the instructions, pick a partner, which we're just going to talk amongst ourselves, and then we'll go from there. So I don't have that page. Sorry, I guess I've kind of forgotten to stay up to this. Sorry, guys, I didn't move this forward here. Okay. Buyer wants to close in 60 days. Is this what's on your page? On page 12? Oh, there we go. Okay, page 12. Sorry, my phone is ringing off the hook. I don't know what's on your page 12 to participate in. Can somebody fill me in? I don't have your guide.
It has like a buyer agent role and a listing agent role, and it gives like a scenario.
Okay. So can you read me the listing agent role?
Do you want me to read the scenario first?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the property has 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bath, and is listed at $350,000 in a well-established neighborhood. The house requires new carpeting throughout the first floor and a new garage door opener. 3 offers have been made, but all were below the asking price.
Okay. So the listing agent says what?
The listing agent, your sellers have raised their family in the house you are selling and have many friends and family in the area. Since their children are now grown, they no longer need the amount of space their current home provides and have purchased a home in Florida. They would like to give all appliances to their daughter, who has just gone through a divorce. They will not be moving until they've sold their current house, and although they would like to go to Florida as soon as possible, they're ready to stand their ground regarding the price.
Oh, goodness. Okay. And so, Amanda, do you want to be the buyer and tell me what it says for the buyer? Or buyer's agent.
Yeah, it says your buyers are making an offer for $340,000 for the house. They have been pre-approved. The buyers would like to close in the shortest time possible since they are moving from out of state and need a home for their family. Since they are leaving their appliances in their current home, the buyers would also like all of the appliances to be included.
Okay. So as a listing agent, I have put in the instructions that my seller is taking all appliances except the stove because we can't take the stove. Mm-hmm. And we need an extended closing date. And so now you're going to call me up and tell me about your buyer and their standing on what you just read there. So go ahead and just read that to me as a buyer's agent and tell me what you need from me.
So I have a buyer that's been pre-approved for $340,000. They'd like to close in the shortest amount of time as possible. But since they're moving from out of state, they would love all the appliances to be included in the sale.
Okay, so Amanda, I have 3 offers and yours is really one of the better ones. Let me talk to my clients. Now I know they want to take all the appliances. They're newer. They want to give them to their daughter. So let me see. What was my list price on this?
$350,000.
And you guys are offering $340,000?
Yep.
So if I was able to talk my client into a $345,000, are your clients pre-approved for that? Could they do $345,000 if I leave all the appliances, and then maybe that would work for my seller to give that extra money to his daughter so that she can buy some new appliances? Do you think we might be able to make something like that work?
Yeah, that might work. I can talk to my clients.
Okay, because they're approved up to 350.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as coming from out of state, I understand that they're going to be moving here. Is there any way that if we needed to have that little extra time to get out, that they could leave later in the other state, or is that a drop dead date for them?
It's a draw dead date for them. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me see, because my clients are buying another home. So I'm going to have to talk to the other agent and see if we might be able to close that home earlier. And then if that's the case and we can do that, then I'll let you know and we'll get my clients out, because I think we would really like to work with your buyers.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of that back and forth is me not saying, no, I told you in the listing agreement, we need 45 days, right? It's me saying, I understand your situation. Let me see if I can work with the other agent and move my people and then your people, because that's kind of a drop dead for you guys. It's not as much a drop dead if my people's house can get available earlier. Maybe we can do an early rental agreement, but definitely the appliances you saw was kind of an easy workaround. So lots of different scenarios with that you could do. So does anybody have any questions about how that worked out or how we talked that through and that kind of thing? Does anybody have any concerns about what you're disclosing from yourself for your buyer?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
So telling the buyer that your clients want to give the appliances to their daughter, their kids, is that disclosing too much information, or is that perfectly fine to share?
Yeah, it's not harming the seller in any way. It's their appliances. They could be throwing them out in the backyard or taking them with them or giving them to somebody or giving them to homeless. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't. If you were to say something like, my sellers cannot afford to buy new appliances, you're then putting information in the buyer's agent's hand that now they're tight with money. So they're not going to be in a position to argue with you much more if they do an inspection and you need stuff done. So you see, don't ever use the terms, that's the most that my buyer has, or like my buyers can't afford more than that, my sellers can't afford more. That's what they're qualified for. That's what my sellers are willing to list at. That's, that's where we've put this based on the market, etc. Not my sellers are getting divorced, and so this is what they need in order for them to part ways and both get what they need. So yeah, just think about, does it harm my client if I disclose that?
Because I know you can't share the motives of your client, so I didn't know if that fell under that category.
You can share, I don't know where the term or the rule of not sharing the motive, because it's about harm. It's a fiduciary duty. So if I say my sellers are getting a divorce, now there's problems, right? So that makes it a disadvantage for my seller. But I can disclose, it's really imperative that we get this sold and closed by the 30th. My sellers have a drop dead date of the 30th. Well, that's when their divorce is final and they need to have funds to move or whatever, right? But I don't disclose that, but I can tell you. My sellers are moving out of state because he got a job promotion. They're really excited and they are raring to go. That's a positive. That's nothing detriment. So I can let you know that. Also, when you make your marketing remarks on your listing, it's because it's usually the listing agent that gets in the most trouble for giving information away. You put the marketing remarks in those boxes, and then your client has to sign that they've read that. So basically, they're giving you permission to state anything that you're putting in there, right? So I'm trying to think what are some things that we put in there that sometimes are a little harmful. Seller lost a job. Not advisable. I mean, when you talk to the selling agent or the buyer's agent, you can say, Morgan, my client lost their job. So this price point that we're at right now, that clears them so that they can pay off the house and get moved into a new one. So we're not negotiable on that. Okay. So you can have permission from the seller to let them know that there is nothing else that you can do about this price, because this is where we are. Always talk to your seller or your buyer about the information that you're going to disclose. My buyer was willing to write that he was an immigrant that had moved here and was looking forward to buying his first home. Some people may not want to disclose that. He did. He's very proud of that fact that he is able to purchase a home in the United States now. And so it's all about whether or not it's going to do detriment to your client. Okay. Your fiduciary duty keeps you from doing anything detrimental to a client. Okay. So next slide. We're going to talk about, you guys are going to analyze and recall counter tactics to make a negotiation win-win. Again, with a partner, but brainstorm a counter tactic that you think you could use in that situation. So are you guys still on page 12 of your guide? Yeah, 13, page 13. We're going to go to 13. And, why don't I pick on somebody that I haven't heard from yet, like Alec Dennis, or who else do we have here? Alec, are you with us? We've lost a couple people. Are we getting out of time? Yeah, we're getting out of time here. So read through page 13, and then you guys can kind of read through. We've really hammered on the tactics and the reasons for, so I'm not going to make us stick too much onto that right now. So you're going to be continuing to work and on that thing there for a few minutes, and we need to match the tactic to nibbling, hot potato, good guy, bad guy, to the counter tactic. So that's what you've got on your page 13, I guess. Is that true? Do you see where you're kind of matching hot potato versus the good guy, bad guy, and you're just going to put it A, B, or C, right? So you call them on their game. If it continues, then attribute what the bad guy says. So they've got that in there for you to review. So I'm supposed to give you a couple minutes for that. Alec, are you there? Okay, Heather H, can you tell me what the hot potato is? Heather's not there either. Okay, how about Heather Dewey? Can you tell me what the hot potato is?
Hot potato. The other party tries to pass a problem on to you. For example, co-op agent tries to pass all closing costs to your client because their client can't afford them. Yep, exactly. Yep. There's a lot of hot potato that goes on in this market. So now who can tell me about the good guy, bad guy? Morgan?
Two people working together, like a husband and wife, will take on opposing roles. One appears friendly and considerate while the other one behaves in a difficult or aggressive manner. Think of a typical car salesperson, good guy who says he's a manager, bad guy won't let him reduce the price any further. Perfect, perfect. And that's, I'll tell you my experience, that's not usually planned. That's just usually the relationship that couple has. So, okay, and who can do the nibbling? Amanda?
Oh, sure. Once your client has agreed upon one major concession, the other party will start nibbling for additional smaller concessions.
Yep, that happens all the time, all the time. They get a little bit and then they want more. So, okay, so this says review the covered in the session, the price terms, the prepare, present, position, and the counter tactics. So now we're going to determine your role and prepare to negotiate a counter offer on their own. So I'm going to have Heather and Morgan, could you guys both talk here on this position that they have for you on this here? It talks about how you'll handle the negotiations both from the buyer agent and the seller agent on the side. I'll have Morgan be the listing agent, and Heather, you can be the buyer's agent.
Are we on 14?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Do you have this page? Do you want me to read it to you first?
Well, since you two are playing it, I don't need to know it, but I don't have the page. So go ahead and just read from the scenario, and then Heather Dewey's going to respond.
Okay. Your sellers need to move within 45 days to a job transfer. You feel that you have priced the house competitively. You are aware that the house needs updating, but the sellers don't see the need because the house was just fine for them. There have been multiple offers. The other offers are still standing, but the timing may not work for the sellers. And the latest offer is lower than the asking price. You have let the buyer's agent know. I must warn you that we have gotten several offers and your offer is pretty low.
Okay. Your clients found a house that they love and it's in the neighborhood that they want. Is at the top of their price range and does need some work updating the kitchen and the master bathroom. Your client makes an offer on the property and the seller's agent says, I must warn you, several other offers and your offer is pretty low.
Okay, so now Heather, you're going to talk to the listing agent and say, can you give me more information how I can bring it up?
So, I mean, can I ask what the needs of your seller are? And what can we do to make our offer more competitive, other than price?
To make it more competitive, I mean, staying close to that price range, I guess they are firm on that. Mm-hmm. They're firm on that. They're only willing to go, I guess, within 5,000, but I would have to go back and double check with them.
Yeah, and then Heather, you can make a request like, are they taking all the appliances? If my buyer lets them take the washer and dryer and refrigerator because they have their own, does that influence them at all? Can you give me any, you're at that person's mercy, her mercy, you're at Morgan's mercy to just say, please just disclose to me what I could do to make this, because they really want it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, does move out date affect anything, closing date, or
closing date? Yes, affects it a lot. Would your clients be able to move within 45 days or sooner?
I absolutely think so. I can definitely ask them that.
Perfect. That's great, because that makes a big difference on closing costs, and that makes a difference then when they're moving in on their new house. So that could be beneficial to both. So good job, ladies. That's really good. Yeah. So it makes you think, and you're not going to be under the guise of somebody watching you when you're doing this. So those are the ideas that you really want to play around with when you're getting ready to negotiate. So I would really look into what are those terms that people are willing to negotiate on. Sometimes is it, the closing dates, the appliances, the inspection, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end here. Let's see what we got. Okay, so we're at ahas and achievements. So go to page 15. So my goal has been to help you think, feel, and act, and use what you've learned to ignite your passion and help you achieve your big why. I'd like you to write down your aha from this class today. And does anybody want to share with me? So this was the first class that I've taught. They're really reaching out to us agents to participate more in online classes, because everybody's so busy right now that we're all having to participate a little bit. I would love feedback. My email again is brenda.pierce@kw.com, or you can give feedback to the ladies at the office and let them know what you thought of the class today. Anybody have an aha that you learned something today that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I didn't know that you could counter offer so many offers at the same time.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, especially verbal. I just really want you to, you get things in writing, you're a little more bound to them, but verbally you can call all 13 people and counter them. Okay.
Doesn't it all have to be in writing though to be enforceable?
It has to be in writing to be enforceable. So when you're countering, what you're doing is you're bringing everybody to a mutual position, and then somebody's going to get in writing, right? You're just going to elevate everybody up to the best point for that seller, and then you're going to get to that one point that that buyer and seller then get all the initials on the changes to make it the offer that is bindable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Let's see. Okay, so we're not going to do role play. See, this class used to be 4 hours too, and now it's only 2. So lead generation and calling for your scripts. We don't do that anymore, but I highly recommend getting into a script class and learning to be able to negotiate in real time with somebody, have them tell you that they're not going to allow the closing costs and what are you going to do instead, and that kind of thing. So Command and Connect is online. You can watch the video of this class on there. I highly recommend that. And please complete the Ignite survey. I'd love to hear what you guys thought of the class. If it was terrible, then I'll never do it again. So I look forward to seeing you guys around the office. Have a great day. If you have any questions or concerns or want some additional advice, there's something that I said that you didn't get to ask a question on. It's brenda.pierce@kw.com. Okay.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.
You're welcome. Take care.